I should have turned back the moment the road ended, when the gravel thinned into mud and the cattails leaned in as though preparing to swallow me whole. I remember that clearly, at least I think I do. Memory has become a slippery thing since Ashbreath Marsh, a creature with its own impulses, darting away whenever I reach for it. But I can still see that first moment. The evening sun bleeding into the murk, painting the swamp water copper. A wind whispered across the reeds like something exhaling through teeth. I'd been warned not to enter. I ignore warnings the way some people ignore ghosts, stubbornly and with the certainty that nothing supernatural will happen to them. But Ashbreath Marsh is older than warnings, older than fences, older, perhaps, than memory itself. At the time, I told myself I was just mapping a route for the conservation survey. Practical job, a logical purpose. But beneath that neat explanation lay another truth I didn't voice. Something had been pulling at me for weeks, a tug in the edges of my mind, like a forgotten obligation or a dream whispering to be remembered. It was as if the marsh had spoken my name in a tongue made of wind and rot. I stepped forward. The mud sucked at my boots with a sound that seemed disturbingly eager, like lips smacking open. The smell hit next. Not the usual swamp stink of decay and algae, but something sweeter, cloying, almost like overripe fruit left too long in the heat. Underneath it lay a second scent, more unsettling, something like old books crumbling into dust. I didn't know then that I was smelling memory itself, dissolving. The fog rolled in quickly, not drifting, but curling, creeping, as though aware of me. A pale green tint shimmered through the mist, and when I breathed it in, my lungs tingled. I coughed, expecting to taste mold or dirt, but instead there was a strange emptiness on my tongue, a sensation like forgetting a word mid-sentence. Still, I kept walking. I should have turned back. I keep telling myself that, though I can't recall the actual moment I lost the option to leave. Maybe that decision slipped away with so many others. At first, everything felt normal enough. Dense, yes. Oppressive, certainly. But I'd been in wetlands before. I had my compass, my pack, my sense of direction. Yet slowly, so slowly I didn't notice, it all began to unravel. It started with small things. I looked down at my map and felt a tremor of confusion. The penciled markings seemed unfamiliar, though I had drawn them myself earlier that day. My own handwriting looked wrong, too angular, too sharp. I frowned, shook my head, and kept moving. Minutes later, or hours, time was already bending. I heard voices, faint ones, whispering between the cattails. I froze, holding my breath. The sounds grew louder, threading through the reeds like thin fingers pulling at invisible strings. I turned in a slow circle, but the fog was too thick to see beyond 10 paces. The whispers rose and fell, as though commenting on my presence. My skin prickled with the sense that I was being discussed, evaluated, maybe even invited. "Hello," I called out. "Is anyone there?" The marsh fell instantly silent. That should have terrified me. Instead, I felt a sudden heaviness in my chest, a sagging, tired disappointment that I couldn't explain. I had the uncanny sensation that I just missed something, someone important, a person I should have recognized. I scanned the fog again. No silhouettes. No movement, just the gray-green mists thickening like coagulating breath. That was the moment I noticed the spores. Tiny motes drifted in the air, glowing faintly in the fading light. They looked like bioluminescent dust, floating with purpose, gathering around me as if drawn to warmth. I reached out instinctively, letting a few settle on my fingers. They glittered for an instant, then dissolved into a smear of moisture that sank into my skin like dew on thirsty soil. A chill shot through me. I wiped my hands on my pants, suddenly uneasy. The tingling spread through my fingertips, traveling up my wrists. My heartbeat jittered. I forced myself to keep moving. I told myself all swamps had spores, fungi, mold. It was normal, natural, explainable. But in my chest, something deeper whispered that the marsh was noticing me, and I was beginning to notice it back. I don't remember when I heard the first splash. It came from behind, a soft, deliberate step into water. I whipped around, squinting through the haze. Nothing. Just the ripples widening outward until they disappeared into the shadowed surface. I stepped backward, pulse racing, and bumped into something solid. Ispun, stumbling. Before me stood a tree. A normal cypress at first glance, though its bark looked darker, almost charred. But what stopped me cold wasn't the appearance. It was the fact that I was certain it hadn't been there a moment ago. The trunk was riddled with knots resembling faces. Drooping eye sockets, hollowed mouths, twisted expressions, all half-formed like memories sinking into mud. I stared, unable to look away. Something inside the tree shifted, subtle, maybe imagined, but enough to send me scrambling back through the water. I nearly fell, catching myself on a root slick with moss. My compass was missing. That realization hit me like a blow. I had clipped it to my jacket only minutes before. Yet when I reached for it, my fingers grazed empty fabric. I checked my pockets, my bag. Nothing. A sickening thought crawled up my spine. Had I even packed a compass? Of course I had. I always did. But the memory felt strangely thin, like tissue paper stretched too tight. The whispers returned. I jerked upright, breathing hard. They came from every direction at once, weaving in and out of the fog, speaking in voices that were almost, but not quite, my own. I tried to follow them. Maybe I thought I could find another person. Maybe I was already being pulled off my intended path. The swamp floor softened beneath my boots, turning spongy, uneven. I kept glancing down, half convinced that the mud was shifting around me, forming hand shapes reaching up from below. The fog grew thicker still. Each breath felt heavier. My thoughts blurred at the edges. At some point, there is no clear moment, I realized I could no longer remember why I had come into the marsh. I stopped walking, disoriented. A cold dread leaked through my ribs. Why was I here? I had a reason, purpose, something important. The conservation survey? Yes, maybe. That sounded right. But it felt like a prepackaged lie, like a story I was reciting from someone else's script. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to ground myself. When I opened them, I wasn't alone. A figure stood several yards ahead, still motionless, half obscured by fog. My breath caught. The shape was human, I thought. A man? A woman? Hard to tell. Something about the posture felt familiar. "Hey!" I shouted. No response. I moved toward them cautiously, each step sinking into muck. The figure remained perfectly still. As I drew closer, details sharpened, but not enough. Their clothes looked ragged, soaked through. Their head hung at an unnatural angle, like they were listening to something under the water. A warning instinct screamed inside me, but another, stranger one whispered urgently, "You know them." I felt that certainty down to my bones. I knew this person. I just couldn't remember how. "Do you need help?" I asked, my voice cracking. Their head twitched. Then, very slowly, they turned toward me. The face that emerged from the fog was smeared with dirt, streaked with greenish residue. Their eyes were hollow, sunken, almost empty, but filled with a glimmer of something like recognition. Their lips parted, and when they spoke, the voice was mine. "Doi." I stumbled back, tripping over a root and falling hard into the water. The shock of the cold jolted some clarity into me. I blinked up, sputtering, and the figure was gone. The mist closed around the place they had been, swallowing the last hint of shape. I scrambled to my feet, shaking. Whatever that was, whoever that was, it hadn't been human. It had worn my voice like a stolen coat. My skin crawled. I needed to leave, find higher ground, path, anything. But as I turned, a wave of dizziness slammed into me. The world spun, tilting and stretching as if the marsh itself were breathing. My vision blurred, fracturing into pieces. I knelt, gripping the mud. My thoughts scattered like birds startled into flight. I couldn't remember which direction I'd come from. I couldn't even remember the layout of the forest outside the swamp. I pressed my palm into the ground, desperate for something real. The mud pulsed beneath my hand. Not shifted, pulsed. I jerked back. The whispers crescendoed, louder now. swirling around me like a chorus of unraveling memories. Words flickered through them. My name, fragments of sentences I didn't recognize, laughter that might have once been mine. I stumbled forward blindly. The landscape began to change. Trees rose like gaunt sentinels, their roots twisting through the water like skeletal fingers. Strange blooms swayed atop tall stalks, releasing more of the glowing spores. For a moment, they looked beautiful in the half-light, ethereal, hypnotic. Then I saw what clung to their stems. Scraps of fabric, strands of hair, fingernail marks in the bark beside them. I backed away, heart hammering. Something splashed to my left, then to my right, then behind me. I ran. Branches clawed at my arms, leaving burning welts. The fog swallowed my path, thickening until I could barely see my own hands. The more I tried to push through, the more the marsh seemed to twist around me, funneling me deeper. A sound rose through the mist, a low, resonant hum, like a hive vibrating through the air. The spores swirled in spirals, forming shapes that almost resembled faces. I thought I recognized some of them. A teacher I once had, an old friend, my mother. My mother? The thought froze me in place. I strained to recall her face, her voice, a memory, any memory. Nothing came. A wave of nausea overtook me. I tried again, harder. A childhood moment, a holiday, a smell, a smile, something, nothing. The marsh hummed louder, as if feeding on my panic. I pressed my hands to my temples, gasping for breath. The mist tightened around me. I felt my memories slipping like sand through open fingers. I opened my mouth to scream, and then I saw the lantern. A dim glow cut through the fog, swaying gently. Warm, golden, impossibly inviting. My breath hitched. The light pierced the haze like a lifeline thrown across deep water. I staggered toward it. As I approached, the silhouette of a small wooden boat emerged, moored to a half-submerged log. The lantern hung from its bow, its flame flickering steadily despite the damp. A figure sat inside, hunched, hooded, still. My pulse thudded in my ears. I hesitated at the water's edge, uncertain whether this was salvation or another trick of the marsh. The figure lifted their head. "Are you lost?" they asked. Their voice was soft, roughened by age or smoke. Human, comfortingly human. I swallowed hard. "Yes," I managed. The hood tilted a fraction. "Then come. The marsh doesn't like wanderers. It keeps what it catches." Who are you?" "Someone who remembers enough," they said simply. "For now." The implication chilled me. Before I could question further, the boatman extended a hand. I hesitated only a moment. Then I stepped into the boat. The wood creaked beneath my weight. The lantern swung gently, illuminating the boatman's face just enough for me to glimpse pale skin, dark eyes, features that looked familiar in a way I couldn't place. Like someone I once knew but hadn't seen in years. They pushed off, guiding us deeper into the waterway. I didn't realize until much later, too late, that they never asked my name. The boat slid silently over the black water, the glow from the lantern reflecting in 1,000 distorted shards. Every ripple seemed to whisper, each one carrying fragments of thoughts I couldn't recall. Faces I might have loved, words I might have spoken. The mist clung close, brushing against my arms like wet fingers, but the lantern kept it at bay just enough for me to breathe. I wanted to speak, to ask questions, but words had begun to feel heavy, cumbersome. My throat ached from trying to anchor myself with language that seemed to crumble before it left my mouth. The boatmen said nothing, rowing steadily, their hands pale, knuckled, moving with a rhythm older than any map or compass. The oar cut through the water like a blade, leaving a trail of stillness behind us. I stared at the black surface, trying to recognize anything. Nothing was familiar. Not the reeds, not the twisted trees leaning like old men whispering secrets. I could not tell which direction we traveled. The mist swallowed everything except the faint glow of the lantern. My mind grasped at threads, snippets of memory, but they always dissolved just before clarity. I wondered if I had ever had a home. I tried to remember the warmth of a room, a smell, the weight of sunlight on my skin. All that came back was emptiness, a hollow wind blowing through my chest. And yet, the boatman's presence felt anchored in something I couldn't yet name. Not trust, something older, recognition. "You will not remember the marsh," the boatman said finally, breaking the silence. Their voice startled me. It carried neither menace nor comfort, just an observation. "What do you mean?" I asked, though I didn't fully understand the question. My own voice sounded strange, like an echo of someone else's. "It takes," they said, "everything it touches. Names, faces, deeds. It keeps nothing. Not even fear is safe. You will forget why you came, who you were, but you might keep a trace of you in the mist." I shivered. "Why me? Why here?" The boatmen tilted their head, a gesture almost curious. "Because you are curious," they said, "and the curious always drift into Ashbreath. Curiosity is a rope that ties a soul to this place. The longer it holds, the deeper you sink." I swallowed. The boat rocked gently, the water lapping against the hull with soft, wet taps. The world outside the lantern's glow was impossible to measure. Trees arched overhead like cathedral ribs, and somewhere in the fog, I heard the marsh breathe. It wasn't wind, not exactly. More like lungs expanding underwater. I tried to call out, to demand an answer. "Are there others?" The boatman said nothing. Their eyes remained fixed on some distant, unseen point. But I thought I caught a shadow moving in the mist, far ahead. A figure, thin, stooped, and gliding as though it floated. I blinked, and it was gone. The water seemed to thicken as we went deeper. My boots had been wet earlier, but now it was as if the swamp itself pressed against my skin, a suction that clung to the edges of memory. My fingers tingled. My lips tasted of mud. Could feel my thoughts fraying. I tried to anchor myself with a name. My name. It was there somewhere at the edge of me, just out of reach. A note held behind a door I could not open. The boatmen turned their gaze to me then, sharp as a blade. "Do not fight it," they said. "The marsh does not just take. You cannot resist. You will remember nothing, and that is its mercy. Those who resist, they lose themselves entirely. Their soul becomes mist. You do not want to become mist." I didn't respond. Couldn't. Words were too heavy. My mind was already beginning to drift. The marsh hummed beneath the water, through the reeds, vibrating in the very bones of my skull. Every thought I tried to hold slipped like wet sand. Then I heard it, a laugh. Soft, childlike, and impossibly close. It echoed from the mist all around me, though I saw no source. A chill crept along my spine. The boatman's hand tightened around the oar. "That is nothing," they said. "Do not answer it. Nothing answers Ashbreath, not without cost." Couldn't resist. I called back, a sound more like a whisper than a scream. The mist swallowed it. Then I felt it, something brushing my arm. Not solid, not wet, like smoke curling across my skin. And with it, a memory flickered, brief and jagged. A hand reaching for mine, soft and small. A laugh, bright and pure. I blinked, and it was gone. I gasped. "Who was that?" I managed. The boatman said nothing. They only rowed. Hours or minutes or some unmeasurable stretch passed. The fog seemed to thicken, pressing against me like walls. Shapes moved at the edges of my vision. Shadowed figures with empty eyes, flickers of faces I might have known. Every time I tried to focus, they melted into the mist. Every time I tried to recall who I was, the marsh pushed the memory further away. Then, a sound unlike anything else, wood groaning. A faint creak, as if the boat itself were alive. I froze. The lantern's glow dimmed slightly, flickering. Something in the water ahead moved. A mass, thick and slow, rippling just beneath the surface. My stomach tightened. My instinct screamed, "Do not look. Do not see." But I did. The water rose, forming a shape that mirrored a man or a memory of one. Not the boatman. Something else. Something wrong. It had no face, yet I could sense eyes where they should have been. limbs twisted impossibly. It hummed, low and wet, like the heartbeat of the swamp. I wanted to scream, but no sound came. My mouth moved, producing only a gurgle that vanished into the thick fog. The boatman's hand shot out, gripping my shoulder. "Do not let it touch you." The figure shifted, gliding beneath the surface, never fully appearing, yet always present. And then it began to hum in tune with the marsh, a rhythm I could feel vibrating through my chest, my teeth, my bones. A melody without words, but full of meaning. A meaning I almost remembered. I felt my memories slipping faster now. Not just names, not just faces, but everything. The feel of soil between my fingers, the smell of rain, the taste of apples in autumn, the warmth of sunlight on my cheek. All dissolving, gone like smoke into the mist. Tears ran down my face, though I didn't know why. Grief? Fear? Memory itself bleeding out? I could not tell. "Hold on to me," the boatman shouted. Their voice cut through the haze, pulling me back, anchoring me just enough to breathe. "You can remember for now, but the marsh will always come. You will forget again. But not here, not while you are in the boat." I clutched the side, knuckles white. My mind scrambled, trying to remember why. Why I had come. Who I was. Who I had loved. What I had lost. The marsh hummed in response, answering with a song of decay and forgetfulness. I wanted to run into it, to embrace the dissolution, but a sliver of resistance remained. A spark too small to see, yet enough to cling to. The boat moved on, cutting through the black water. Shapes in the mist flickered. Faces, hands, forms half remembered. I did not look directly at them. I did not speak. Hours later, I do not know how long, I saw a faint line ahead. The mist thinned slightly. Trees receded. The swamp opened into something else. Light, pale and gray, not the copper sun of before. The boatman slowed. "You may leave here," they said. "But the marsh, Ashbreath, it will not forget you. You may leave, but pieces of you remain. Always." I stepped out of the boat onto solid ground. The mud gave way beneath my boots, but it was manageable now. The fog lingered at the edges, reluctant to release me. I glanced back at the boat, but the lantern was gone, and the boatman with it. I don't know if they left or never existed at all. I stumbled forward, finally out of the mist into a gray, quiet morning. My mind was a blank slate. Names, places, faces gone. Only fragments remained, little pulses of recollection that seemed to vibrate just out of reach. I have no idea why I came. Cannot remember who I was. But sometimes, when the wind is right and the fog presses against my window at night, I think I hear Ashbreath humming, a lullaby of things lost. And I know, deep inside, that it waits for me to return. Days, weeks, maybe months passed, I cannot tell. Time in Ashbreath Marsh does not move in hours or days. It moves in pulses, in memories gained and lost. I tried to resume a life outside, or what I thought of as a life. Friends asked questions I could not answer. Faces I should have recognized were blurred and hollow, like smudged photographs. I could speak, eat, sleep, but beneath the mundane, the marsh had left a scar I could not name. Sometimes, when I closed my eyes, I saw the fog curling in the corners of rooms, creeping under doors, wrapping around beds like a lover I could not resist. The spores, their touch lingered. In dreams, they drifted into me, carrying whispers of things I had forgotten before I even knew them. Names, voices, laughter, cries, places I had never visited and yet remembered as home. I knew it was only a matter of time before curiosity drew me back. The spark the boatman had warned me about, the one that had survived the first encounter, still glowed faintly in my chest. And when the marsh calls, it does not simply invite. It hunts, it pulls, it coils around the edges of the mind, tugging relentlessly until you return. I returned. I cannot say why, only that one evening I felt the pull again. It started as a whisper, drifting through my thoughts. The air in my room thickened, turning damp and green, smelling faintly of decay and sweet rot. I tried to leave, but my feet carried me down streets I no longer recognized. The fog rose in the distance, a pale green curling tendril that wrapped itself around the horizon. By the time I reached the outskirts of the swamp, the night had fallen. Ashbreath greeted me silently, waiting like a patient predator. My boots sank into mud as if the swamp itself remembered me, remembered my first steps and my first fear. I paused at the edge of the water, staring into the black surface. It rippled without wind, without any discernible cause. And then I saw them, figures emerging from the mist. Not human, not fully, but familiar. Wanderers like me, others who had come, who had lost themselves piece by piece. Their eyes were hollow, their faces blurred, yet they reached towards something they could not name. "Do you remember?" A voice whispered, impossibly close. It was my voice, my own. I stepped forward. The mud clung greedily to my boots, sucking me into the swamp. Each step felt like walking through a memory I had no right to recall. The figures circled me, murmuring, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of half-remembered words. I tried to speak, but my voice was drowned by the hum of Ashbreath itself. It was there in the water, in the reeds, in the air I breathed, a living, breathing consciousness that fed on forgetting. A hand reached for mine, cold, wet, familiar. I recoiled, and the hand vanished into the fog. Then another appeared, and another. The swamp was alive with them, the lost, the half-remembered, the erased. Each one a fragment of a life stolen, a story abandoned. Their whispers formed a rhythm I could not escape, pulling at the edges of my mind. I ran or thought I ran. The swamp shifted beneath me, paths twisting, water rising, reeds bending to block my way. Faces formed in the mist, each one mine, each one someone else. Memories clashed and collided, a tempest of identity and forgetting. I stumbled into the water, cold and dark, and felt the pull of the marsh beneath my feet. It wanted me to sink, to dissolve into it completely. Panic surged through me, but a single thought anchored me. The boatmen. I called for them, my voice cracking, splintering against the fog. For a moment I felt nothing. Then, a faint glow appeared in the distance. A lantern, swinging gently, steady against the chaos. I moved toward it, limbs trembling. The boatmen waited, as always, oar in hand, their face obscured by the hood. "You are late," they said simply. No accusation, only observation. I can't. "They won't stop," I whispered, clutching the edge of the boat. "They never do," the boatman replied. "Ashbreath feeds on memory. You cannot outrun it. You can only navigate it." I climbed into the boat, shivering, and the boatman pushed off. The water closed behind us, swallowing the lost voices, the reaching hands, the fragments of selves. But the hum of the marsh followed, low and persistent, vibrating through the wood, through the water, through my chest. Hours, or whatever passes for hours here, drifted by. I could barely distinguish reality from hallucination. The boatman never spoke unless necessary. The mist closed around us, thickening, shaping, teasing. Figures appeared and vanished. Whispers rose and fell, and every time I tried to hold a thought, it dissolved into fog. Then came the first test. From the water a form rose. Human at first glance, tall, but with limbs too long, eyes too deep, mouth too wide. It reached for the boat, and the water around it shimmered with spores. "Remember me," it hissed, voice a mosaic of all the voices I had lost. I felt the tug in my chest, the spark of recognition that the boatman had warned me about. A fragment of a memory, someone I had loved, perhaps, tried to cling to me. I flinched, trying to resist, trying to hold onto the boat, onto the boatman, onto whatever piece of myself remained. "You will not win," the boatman said softly, more to me than to the figure. "Not yet. Hold on. Anchor yourself in what is left." I focused on the boatman, on the lantern's glow, on the steady rhythm of the oar cutting through water. Slowly, the form in the swamp shrieked, a sound of all memories unmade, and sank beneath the surface. I gasped, trembling. What were they? They were a memory, the boatman said simply. A fragment Ashbreath discarded, but not yet consumed. They reach for others as they once reached for themselves. I nodded, trying to grasp the meaning, but understanding slipped through my fingers. Words had lost their power here. Only presence, only sensation, only the will to hold on mattered. The boat glided onward. The mist thinned slightly, revealing patches of water where the moon reflected faintly. Shapes formed on the shore, twisted trees, reeds, flowers like tiny lanterns. But they were distant, almost welcoming, almost safe. But I knew better. Ashbreath is patient. It waits for curiosity to flare again. It waits for the spark of memory to shine too bright. And then it pulls inexorably until the spark is snuffed, until you are part of the mist, indistinguishable from the fog, a whisper among whispers. I clung to the boatman. We did not speak. Words had become meaningless. Only the rhythm of the oar, the glow of the lantern, the pulse of my own heartbeat mattered. And somewhere in the back of my mind, buried beneath fear and fog, a question persisted. A question I cannot answer, though I try every day. Was I returning to the marsh because I remembered it, or because I had never truly left? The boat moved slowly now, as if the marsh itself had grown tired, its hunger sated for a moment. But I knew better. This place, Ashbreath, never grows tired. It only waits. The mist deepened again, swirling around the boat with an eerie patience, threading through the reeds like fingers searching for something to grasp. I tried not to look at the shapes in the fog, not to focus on the way they shifted and shuddered like memories caught in a current. The figures that flickered in the edges of my vision were people, once. Some of them might have been me for all I could tell. The marsh has a way of twisting what you see. It erases details, blurs faces, reshapes the familiar into something wrong. That is how it feeds, by warping the very fabric of who you are until you cannot distinguish between yourself and what you have lost. I turned my face away from the fog, focusing instead on the boatmen, who remained silent, their hands steady on the oars. But their presence was like a weight on my chest, a reminder of the inevitability of everything that was happening. "Why do you do it?" I asked suddenly, the words coming out more bitter than I intended. "Why do you bring us here, to this place?" The boatman's face remained hidden beneath their hood. The lantern swung in the dim light, casting flickering shadows on the water's surface. After a long pause, they answered, their voice soft but steady. "I don't bring you here. Ashbreath calls you." I didn't respond. The words gnawed at me, but I couldn't find a way to refute them. I had come willingly, hadn't I? It had been curiosity, a desire to understand, to explore. The swamp had only shown me what I wanted to see, then stripped it away piece by piece. Then a voice rose from the mist. It wasn't mine this time. "Help me." The voice echoed, breaking through the air like shattered glass. It was faint, weak, distant, but it sounded familiar. I turned sharply, expecting to see a figure approaching through the fog. Instead, there was nothing but the water rippling gently beneath the boat. The boatmen didn't flinch, didn't even glance at the sound. They simply rowed onward. "Who was that?" I asked, my heart racing. "Who's out there?" "A memory," the boatman replied, their tone unwavering. "Like you." I couldn't make sense of that. How could I be a memory? I wasn't some disembodied voice crying for help. I had a body, a pulse. I could feel the cold air against my skin. I still felt like me, though the longer I stayed here, the less sure I became of what that meant. The boatman's eyes shifted toward me, their expression unreadable in the dim light. "You don't want to find out," they said, their voice low. "You don't want to follow those voices. They will lead you to places you can never return from." I didn't understand. "We're lost, then?"
No.
"Not lost, just forgotten." They paused, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw something flicker in their eyes, a glimmer of something old, ancient. Those who wander Ashbreath do so because they are no longer needed. The marsh calls them because they are already forgotten, and the swamp, it remembers. I stared at them, my stomach tight. Their words stung in a way I couldn't explain. like the sharp sting of salt on an open wound. I was forgotten. Ashbreath had claimed me already, hadn't it? The swamp had dissolved my memories, pulling them into its dark, endless depths. Do you think you can keep what remains? The boatman asked, almost as if reading my thoughts. Do you think it will last? What you remember now, what you think you know, it will dissolve as surely as everything else. I clenched my fists, trying to hold on to the fleeting fragments of who I was. But the harder I tried, the more they slipped through my fingers. I could barely remember my own face. The edges of my memories were turning to ash, crumbling and scattering on the wind like dead leaves. I turned away from the boatman and looked into the water. The fog thinned for just a moment, revealing a pale, skeletal tree that twisted like a broken spine above the surface. The roots snaked down into the water like hands reaching for something buried beneath. Couldn't look away. My gaze locked onto the tree's gnarled form, its branches hanging like twisted fingers. And then I saw something, no, someone I recognized. A woman stood beneath the tree. Her back was to me, but I knew her. I could feel the name at the tip of my tongue, could hear her voice from a life I once knew. But it didn't matter. The woman turned. Her eyes were hollow, empty voids. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. Only a faint, desperate whisper echoed from her throat. A wordless plea for something I couldn't understand. Her face was covered in mud, but I saw something beneath it, something I should have recognized. A memory, my memory. But then she smiled. The smile was wrong, crooked. It stretched too far, too wide, as if her face had been pulled out of shape. I recoiled, my chest tightening, and I tried to call out, but my voice was swallowed by the swamp. The figure reached for me, the fingers long and skeletal. And suddenly I knew what she was. She wasn't a person. She wasn't even a memory. She was a part of me, and Ashbreath had consumed her. The figure jerked forward, her hands gripping the air, reaching for me. I stumbled back, but I could not look away. My breath quickened, my heart racing as the figure's hands stretched impossibly long. Her eyes burned into mine, and I felt my own memory unraveling, thread by thread, as though her touch could strip away everything I had left. No, I gasped, the word coming out broken. Please, I don't want to forget. I can't forget. But it was too late. The mist thickened again, swallowing the figure whole. Her outstretched fingers dissolved into the fog, and the last shred of me vanished without a trace. The water settled, smooth again, as though nothing had happened. I looked to the boatmen, but their face remained hidden. They hadn't reacted, hadn't flinched. Who was she? I asked, though I already knew. The question tasted wrong in my mouth, hollow. Another piece of you, the boatman said softly. And now she is gone. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shout, to demand answers. But I felt it then, the pull, the hollow ache at the center of my chest. It was growing, spreading. The marsh had taken her, just as it had taken so much of me. It wasn't just memories. It wasn't just faces. Ashbreath consumed everything, down to the very soul, leaving nothing behind but whispers and shadows. I was becoming one of them, a shadow in the mist. The boatmen glanced at me. Don't be afraid, they said. The marsh will give you more. It will take and take, but it will always leave something in return. I wasn't sure if that was meant to comfort me, but it didn't. Nothing could comfort me now. I could already feel myself slipping away again, pulled by the fog, by the hunger of Ashbreath. We moved deeper into the swamp. The mist thickened, curling tighter around us. The whispers rose again, louder, closer. The voices of the lost, calling out to each other, to themselves. The figures in the mist stretched toward us, hands reaching, faces twisting in the void. I tried to hold on, but the boatman was right. It was already too late. The boat continued to glide through the still water, but the sense of movement had become irrelevant. Time had no meaning here. Each stroke of the oar was a gesture in the dark, a whisper into the void, and yet we were moving forward, or at least I thought we were. The edges of my mind frayed as I tried to anchor myself in the present, in this boat, In the body I still remembered to be mine. But each breath I took felt heavier. Each thought seemed further out of reach, slipping through my grasp as if the marsh itself were sucking it away. I wanted to ask the boatman questions, but each time I opened my mouth, I forgot what they were supposed to be. The words collapsed before I could form them, swallowed by the mist. A headache bloomed at the base of my skull, a sharp, persistent ache that only seemed to intensify the longer I lingered here. The figures in the mist had grown bolder, now more distinct. They reached out, their hands glowing faintly, but when I turned to look at them directly, they vanished, leaving only the thick fog behind. But I could still feel them, pressing at the edges of my awareness, tugging at the very corners of my mind, trying to pull something out of me. I felt like I was forgetting who I was, but I wasn't sure if I ever truly knew anymore. There was a noise behind me, soft, like the rustle of something moving in the fog. I turned instinctively, though I wasn't sure why. The boatman's grip on the oar remained steady, their face still obscured, their focus unbroken. Another voice, soft and distant, drifted through the fog. "Help me, please." This time it sounded different. The voice was older, more desperate, a plea that echoed with something primal. But what disturbed me most was that I knew that voice. It was my own. I couldn't bring myself to look back. I felt it, the sense that someone, was behind me, too close, breathing in the dark. But I couldn't remember who they were. Was it my reflection in the water? Was it the part of me that was being left behind? Or was it something worse? A fragment of myself I could never retrieve, trapped in this endless cycle of forgetting? I turned back to the boatman, my voice barely a whisper. "What is it? What's happening?" The boatman's hands moved with calm precision, the oar cutting through the water without a sound. They said nothing at first, and then, finally, they spoke, their voice like a breath of cold air. "Nothing has happened yet," they said. "But it will. It always does." I didn't know how to respond to that. The fog seemed to swallow the words before they could leave my mouth. The other me, the one I could hear but could not see, was still out there, whispering my name, calling to me. The more I tried to ignore it, the louder it became. I tried to shut it out, but the voice was insistent, growing sharper. "Help me, please. Don't leave me here." It cracked, breaking in half like something too fragile to hold. "Stop," I gasped, my chest tight with panic. "I don't remember. I can't." The boatmen turned their head toward me for the first time since we had set out. There was something unsettling in the way their eyes glowed dim, empty, as though they could see something that I couldn't. They didn't speak, but their presence was enough. "You must," they said softly. "But not now. Not yet. The marsh will take you fully in time, but it will not be until you have let it." I swallowed, trying to understand. My mind felt thick, like trying to wade through quicksand. Let it? Let what? I don't even know what I am anymore. I wanted to scream, but all I could do was tremble as the whispering grew louder, more frantic. The voice in the mist had changed now. There was an edge of panic in it, a growing terror that echoed in my bones. It was me, but not me. I could feel it, deep in the pit of my stomach. The swamp was pulling at pieces of me I wasn't ready to give up, pieces that were already gone. A movement in the mist caught my eye. It was a figure shifting slowly, its shape growing clearer with each passing second. Its face flickered in and out of focus, like a mirage, but it felt familiar. Too familiar. The longer I stared at it, the more certain I became. It was me, but it was wrong. The figure had the same hollow eyes I had seen in the woman before, the ones that reached out, asking for help, but now they stared back at me, cold, unblinking. "Help me," it said again, but the voice was different now. It was a low, guttural thing, a voice that crawled across the walls of my skull. My heart slammed in my chest. I didn't want to look at it anymore. I didn't want to be reminded of what I was losing, of what I had already lost. I felt the boat slow. The oar dipped lower into the water, dragging lazily. Something in the air shifted. Everything grew colder, quieter. The figure, me or the thing that had once been me, stepped out of the mist, its form becoming clearer with each step, but it wasn't walking. It was gliding, floating above the water like a shadow trying to break free. Its face twisted, shifting between a reflection of me and something darker, something I couldn't understand. "I am you," it whispered, its voice vibrating in my skull. "You are me. We are one. We are Ashbreath." I recoiled, my stomach twisting. The world around me seemed to tilt, the edges of reality pulling further and further apart. The marsh hummed, the water creaking under the weight of something ancient and hungry. The boatmen did not move, did not speak. But they didn't need to. The figure reached toward me, stretching its hand out with impossible slowness. I felt the air thicken as it came closer. The whispering grew louder, filling my head with voices. My voices, fragments of thoughts and feelings that weren't mine anymore. I could hear them now, the voices of the lost, the pieces of my own past all around me. They called for me, reaching for me, desperate to pull me in. And then I understood. Ashbreath wasn't just a place. It was a reflection of the mind. The marsh consumed not just memory, but the very essence of who you were. It consumed your identity, piece by piece, until all that was left was the echo of your own desperation. It wasn't just about forgetting. It was about becoming part of the swamp. The figure stepped closer, its hand outstretched, its eyes hollow but knowing. I had already been consumed. The boatman's voice broke through the fog again. "Don't look at it. It is already inside you. Don't let it take you completely." But it was too late. Couldn't resist. I had been pulled in the moment I first stepped into the boat. I reached out to it, and as my fingers brushed against its cold, empty hand, the world shattered. The moment my fingers met the figures, the world around me vanished, the edges of reality crumbling like paper caught in flames. I was no longer in the boat, no longer in Ashbreath. I was nowhere, a place of endless fog and shadows, an empty void where time had no hold. The cold, wet air pressed against me from all sides, like being submerged in a lake of ice. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The fog was thick, suffocating, and my body, if it could even be called that now, felt alien to me, distant. I reached for myself, but my hands, my arms, my very mind, none of them seemed to belong to me anymore. The figure before me had consumed everything, and now it was the only thing left. Its hollow eyes stared at me, the same eyes I had once seen in the mirror, the same face that had once smiled back at me. "We are the same," it whispered. "We are part of the same thing. The marsh never forgets." This voice was my own voice, and yet it wasn't. It was cold, drained of emotion, devoid of humanity. And I knew deep down that this thing, the thing that was me and wasn't me, was the very essence of Ashbreath. It was the marsh itself, reaching into my soul, pulling everything away until nothing remained but this endless, gnawing hunger. I tried to scream, to fight back, but no sound escaped my lips. There was only the thrum of the swamp in my chest, a pulse that matched the beating of my heart. But with each pulse, I could feel myself slipping further away. Pieces of me scattered, dissolving into the mist. My memories, my thoughts, my feelings, they all crumbled to dust. The figure reached out, and its fingers were long and thin, like branches of a tree twisted and gnarled. They touched my cheek, and in that instant, I felt myself slipping into it. My mind, my very essence, was being pulled into the void of Ashbreath. I could feel my identity dissolving into the swamp, becoming nothing more than a fragment, a whisper. And then there was a shift. The mist cleared for a moment, and I saw a distant shape in the darkness. A flicker of light, a glowing orb in the distance. It was faint, far away, but it pulsed like a heartbeat. The lantern, the boatman, the boat. I gasped, my lungs filling with air I didn't think I had. For the briefest of moments, I felt something that resembled clarity, an anchor pulling me back toward the light. But it was fleeting. The figure, the shadow that was once me, pulled at my soul, its grip tightening around my throat, dragging me further into the black. But still there was the lantern, the faint glimmer, steady against the darkness. With all the strength I had left, I wrenched myself free, stumbling toward the light, toward the boat, toward whatever small part of me still remained. The fog swirled in around me, pulling at my feet, at my legs, at my very being, but I pushed forward. I reached out, but the world around me had shifted again. The boatman was there, but the boat had disappeared, replaced by a vast, endless lake of black water, stretching into infinity. The lantern still glowed, hanging in midair, but everything else was swallowed by the void. Why? I gasped. Why is this happening? The boatmen didn't answer immediately. They simply stood, motionless, watching me. And for a moment I wondered if they were even real. Were they a part of the marsh too? Another reflection of something lost? Another fragment of my broken self? But then they spoke. "This is the end of what was," the boatman said, their voice low and distant. "Ashbreath does not offer endings. It only offers transformation. You were never meant to leave. You were never meant to remember." I shook my head, tears flooding my eyes. I had no words for the agony that surged in my chest. This couldn't be it. I couldn't be lost forever, consumed by a place that took what was human, what was real, and turned it into shadows. "Please," I whispered, "please, tell me, what can I do? What can I become?" The boatman's eyes glinted in the faint light, and they reached out slowly, placing a cold hand on my shoulder. "You already are," they said softly. "And that is the cruelest part of Ashbreath. There is nothing you can do, nothing you can become that has not already been decided." A shiver ran through me, colder than anything I had felt before. I was part of Ashbreath now, a reflection, a memory, a fragment. The marsh had taken me, and in return, it had given me this endless, hollow existence between the world of the living and the dead. A place of whispers, a place where nothing remained but the fog and the hunger, a place where I could never leave, and I could never truly remember who I was. "Are you a part of me too?" I asked, my voice barely more than a breath. The boatmen paused. For a moment, their gaze softened, the tiniest hint of something human flickering behind the emptiness in their eyes. "We all are," they replied, and with that, they turned away, their form dissolving into the mist, leaving me alone in the vast expanse of darkness and fog. The lantern continued to glow, a small flicker in the endless black. I reached out for it, desperate, but as my fingers brushed against the light, the fog closed in around me once more, swallowing it whole. And then there was nothing. I awoke to the sound of the swamp. It was not like waking up from sleep. There was no distinct shift, no clear sense of time passing, no sensation of returning from a dream. There was only the pulse of the marsh, a hum that reverberated through my very being, pulling me from whatever state I had been in. A deep, suffocating fog closed in around me, thick and choking, but I had no form to fight against it. My limbs were numb, my mind hazy. I could no longer tell where I ended and the swamp began. And yet, somehow I knew I was still here. Ashbreath had consumed me, as it had consumed countless others before me. The fog was my skin now, the murky water was my blood. I could feel the whispers of those who had come before me, those whose names had long since vanished from memory, but whose voices still filled the void. They were like tendrils of thought, brushing against the edges of my mind, sometimes just close enough to hear, but always slipping away the moment I tried to grasp them. I floated in the nothingness of the marsh, my consciousness fragmented, scattered like pieces of a broken puzzle. I had no form, no face, no name. I was no longer the person I had once been. I had become part of Ashbreath, just another piece of the swamp's insatiable hunger. I tried to speak, but the words never came. I tried to remember who I was, but every time I reached for that flicker of self, it was swallowed by the fog. It was as though the very act of remembering was a violation, an offense to the swamp's all-consuming power. The swamp did not allow remembrance. It did not allow self. It only allowed the now, the constant pulsing hum of hunger that was the heart of Ashbreath. I couldn't tell how much time passed. Time, as I had once known it, no longer existed. There was only the fog, the whispers, the gnawing hunger in my chest. But then, as if by some cruel twist of fate, the mist parted. A figure stood before me, outlined in shadow. They were familiar, yet not. Their face was obscured, but I knew them, somehow knew them deep in my bones. The boatman, the one who had ferried me through the marsh, the one who had warned me of the hunger, of the transformation that awaited me. "You've returned," the boatman said, their voice as calm and emotionless as it had been when we first met. I couldn't speak, couldn't even move, but I felt something stirring within me, some fragment of recognition that had not yet been swallowed by the swamp. The boatman's words echoed in my mind. I never left, I thought, but the words remained trapped inside my head, unable to form in the air around me. The boatman didn't seem to need a response. They reached out a hand, their fingers pale and long, like the branches of a dead tree. And I understood, then. I understood what I had become. I had become one of them, one of the forgotten, one of the lost, one of the memories that Ashbreath had stripped from the world, only to return to it, transformed and empty. "Do you remember the boat?" the boatman asked, their voice carrying through the fog like a fading echo. I wanted to scream, to tell them that I didn't want to remember, but the scream never came. I didn't have the voice for it. I was not allowed to feel the weight of my loss. Ashbreath had stolen it all. It had stolen the very essence of me. And yet there it was, the boat. I could see it now, slowly materializing through the mist, its shape clear and solid. The boat that had once carried me through the swamp. The boat that had been my only means of escape, my only lifeline. But there was no escape anymore. There was no way out of Ashbreath. I couldn't say it. I couldn't even think it. The hunger had consumed me fully. I was Ashbreath now. I was the mist. I was the shadow. I was nothing more than a whisper in the fog, a voice that would never be heard again. The boatmen took a step forward, their hands still reaching out. They had no eyes, no features, just a hollow form, a reflection of all that had been lost in Ashbreath. But there was something in their presence that stirred the last remnants of what I had been. Something like recognition. "You are not alone," the boatman said softly, "but you are forgotten." The words echoed in the void, lingering long after they had been spoken. And for a brief moment, I thought I could hear the faintest trace of a voice, calling my name. It was a sound I could almost place, almost remember, but then it was gone, swallowed by the fog. I looked at the boatman, knowing, somehow, that I was no longer the same. I wasn't lost, not in the way I had once thought. I was part of the marsh now. I was the fog, the whispers, the memory. And I would be here, forever, drifting between the forgotten, reaching for something I could never touch. "You'll never leave," the boatman said, as though reading my thoughts. "None of us ever do." The mist closed in around us once more, thick and oppressive. The boat drifted forward, its lantern swaying gently in the windless air. The boatmen stood by my side, their presence both alien and familiar. And we were silent, together in the suffocating stillness of Ashbreath. The marsh had claimed me, just as it had claimed all the others before me. I was no longer a person. I was no longer anything. I had become one with the fog, one with the hunger, one with the swamp that devours all things, memories, souls, identities. The boatman's gaze lingered on me for a moment longer, and then they spoke once more, their voice soft but clear. "Remember this. The swamp does not forget. It only waits." And with those words, they pushed the boat forward, disappearing into the mist, leaving me alone. Alone, but not lost. The whispers began again, but this time they were mine. The echo of myself, lost in the endless hunger of Ashbreath, drifting through the mist, always reaching but never quite grasping, always remembering but never fully knowing.